So this week we had to watch two videos and read an article, two of which actually keyed into one another. The article and one of the videos actually upheld one another in the sense that the article was actually using quotes from the person that was presented in the video. So going on to the article was called "The Hoarding of the American Dream." They tapped into how they used an example how this New York couple is saying or is claiming that they're scraping by although they're making six figures, and they're really trying to tap into that they're upper middle class. They're trying to tap into that middle classness and saying that everything's super expensive and everything costs money. So they need to use that middle class aspect in order to try to stray away from some of the laws that they're not, or some of the taxes they're not necessarily voting for. So just tapping into that middle classness in order to steer away from some of those aspects that might not necessarily help their family. So it really dives into how this is actually provoking rage among other people because it's not actually just the top 1% affecting everyone, it's actually the top 20%, because in a sense they're actually big beneficiaries to the country's growth, so they're actually a contributing factor and they need to be taken into consideration. So it shows that they're engaging in activity that does not just help their families, but it actually hurts the rest of the 80% of Americans. So that's where that issue of not just the top 1% falls into key, but the top 20%, because they're doing things in order to benefit their family, which, yes, they're benefiting their family, but they're hurting the rest of the country, the other 80% of Americans. So in order to solve that, the article states that in order to solve the situation, we need to narrow the gap, or to narrow the gap, you need to actually extend a broader conception of what rich is, because right now it's such a narrow-minded situation that, okay, this is what rich is, and if you don't do this and this and this, you're not rich. But it's not necessarily the case, in the sense that if you're making these figures and you're able to be a big beneficiary of the country's growth, that may lead to you being rich and not necessarily needing to tap into that middle class aspect of things. And it also talked about how there's 5 dimensions that actually have pulled them away from the middle class, in a sense of income or wealth, education, family structure, geography, and health. And what it means by that, they're actually making more income or wealth in regards to what middle class really makes. Their education is more sustainable and actually at a better level. Their family structures, maybe it could potentially be more in a sense, they have every aspect that should hold their family together, and it's very traditional. Then 4 is geography. Just because they're making those higher figures, they're able to stay in a more geographical friendly area. And last, health, in the sense that they're able to sustain a healthier living in order to live a longer life and a more prosperous life. So that's just something that those 5 aspects have actually taken them away from the middle class and need to be recognized in order to achieve that narrow gap. And it's just showing that their income gains have actually been sizable, in the sense that their kids are getting into top colleges. They're living in those nice neighborhoods. They're having healthy living, which leads to healthy body, which leads into longer lives. And so in regards to the wealth situation, it's actually showing that these wealthier families are passing on what you would call glass floors to kids. And just basically how these classifications, that's a weird, are actually inherited, in the sense that if your family has money, it's going to get passed on and on and on. And even if they don't necessarily, not necessarily just because they have the money, you're doing well, but that money can lead to better education, better living, healthier living. So we're actually becoming a class-based society, in the sense that those 5 things are separating us, and it's actually making a bigger gap. And in order to do that, we need to recognize what rich really is. And it closes up by saying that sensible politics is not always the easy way to go. Sometimes that upper middle class is going to have to vote for those higher taxes, and they might not necessarily want to do so. And in order to justify that, they're going to pull out that middle class instead of that upper part, and that's where our situation is starting to hinder our actual growth, and recognizing that it's not just 1%, but it's 20%. Moving on to the video, it is a video that taps into Richard Reeves, who is the person that wrote the book, and he's the one that really is really diving into that 20% rather than 1%. He talks about the American inequality and American dream, and it was quite funny. He was a very, I would say, humorous speaker, and he made it very entertaining for the viewers because he kept you very intrigued, because he kept you on your toes and really having to listen and pull into those little jokes and slight comments that he made. So the video is actually very intriguing, but he talks about how the class system in the US and the UK is very different, in the sense that the US actually it operates more ruthlessly, in a sense, to be more efficient than the UK does. UK is very particular on their class system, and that they say that it's kind of like what you wear, how you dress, or what you wear and dress, and then how you eat, how you portray yourself, how you talk. Those classes are very very cut and dry. You can recognize what someone wears and say, oh, they're in this class, or how someone eats. For example, he went to, I believe he said Berkeley, if I'm not mistaken. He went to a higher end college, and he said that when he was eating there with them, he cut his cheese the wrong way, and they were like, oh, he's in this class, and he didn't even know what that meant. But just by the way he ate, they were able to tell his class. So it's just showing that in the UK, it's a very class-based system. But in the U.S., he pointed out that in the U.S., to become a U.S. citizen, you have to sign this document saying that you're going to get rid of your nobility and your wealth and etc. in order to become a United States citizen, because ideas inherited of status is profoundly un-American. So basically, having a status here isn't how the American way operates, that it's not part of the American dream to be part of status. But in reality, we need to go beyond inequality and look at the stratification in the class, how it's actually the inequality is there, like there are actual classes, and by ignoring it and saying that we don't have these classes, it's actually creating a bigger problem at hand, because we're not recognizing that there really are classes, and some people necessarily might need more help than others. We're saying that we're all equal, but yet again, here we tap into the equal but not equitable society, and taking a step back and realizing that not everyone's starting at the same place, but we're treating everyone as if they do start at the same place, which can be an issue. And he said that he really got intrigued with this topic when President Obama was in office, because I liked how he used this example, because he made his own little jokes because he wasn't actually there. But basically, Obama was flying in Air Force One, and Nancy Pelosi got a call from an official that told her about this tax reform that President Obama was going to do, and basically told her he needs to kill it, it's not a good idea, drop it. So she went to Obama, told him, drop it. The next day, it was dropped. Basically, the reform was what you would call the 529 college saving plan. It was killed, but it basically was a savings plan to save for post-secondary education expenses, and the money in the account was free from capital gains tax and gift taxes. So basically, that money would be sitting there and not being taxed, and able to gain more interest and such. So it was actually killed by liberal Democrats, and their constituents weren't very happy about it. But anyways, that movement showed that there was a bigger problem, in a sense, that there was they were trying to hide that classlessness, and actually just kind of camo it and hide it and push it away, that you don't need that bill because there is no problem, there is no different classes, it's fine, everything will be okay. So I didn't know about that, and then when I heard about it, I did a little more research, and it's very crazy that, it kind of was hiding the bigger problem at hand, and that it was trying to show that there was no divide, but there actually really is. So, he kind of dives into his argument of the book that the upper middle class which is the 20%, does have a hand in bigger decisions, that there is downward mobility, and he made a joke that kind of gets you away from getting dinner invitations, and basically it's a class war. So yeah, he talks about all of that. He definitely dives into absolute mobility and relative mobility, in the sense that absolute mobility is you're better off in material terms than your parents were at the same age, and then relative mobility, which you're one of the latter, you are on relative to your relative to where your parents were at your age. So you're one of the latter. So relative mobility and absolute mobility. He really taps into those and talks about how in the 40s we were growing and evenly distributed, and that it was like 90% rate that you would be higher than your parents at their specific age. But in the 80s, it was a coin toss, because only 50% had the chance of actually being at a higher point that their parents were at the same age. And that was because most of the drop is because of the growing inequality rather than low growth rate. So a lot of tables are trying to show that because we have a slower growth rate, that's what's causing this really high difference in where you are rather than where they were in the 40s. But that's not necessarily the sense. It's a sense that not everything's being evenly distributed, and it's actually growing inequality. So we don't need to just focus on what's at the bottom, but rather focus on what's at the top, and that'll actually help us a little bit in that a sense that that is an issue. So last thing that I really want to tap into is how he talks about how in the U.S. money, there's a big gap between the 90th and 50th percentile, but in the U.S., money matters more, in the sense that money can buy you, can get you certain advantages that in other countries might not necessarily be true. For example, education. Sometimes money can dive into that. So, basically, how the bottom 40. I'm gonna go tap into the education aspect. That the bottom 40 of our income rate are in community colleges. The middle is in community colleges or lesser schools, and the top is in your prestige Ivy League schools. And so just tapping into that. So it's really what you would call opportunity hoarding, and that's kind of what the first paper was going into, in a sense that you have your inclusionary zoning, so it's actually trying to cut off people of lower incomes and just keep it for those higher income families in order to get better education privileges. And then your legacy emissions, he really didn't tap into that, because he said not much needed to be said there, that it's just not something that needs to be practiced. And then lastly, internship opportunities, in the sense that sometimes those of higher wealth are able to make internships for particular people. He talked about a senator or a governor that created an internship for his children and didn't have any political backlash, which that probably shouldn't have been the case, but it did happen. So in order to resolve this, we really need to convince the rich that, or convince the middle upper class that they're actually pretty wealthy and needed to look at this in a different light. Of course, when you he points this out, so of course when you surround yourself with people of the same type, so say you're making 6 figures, you're surrounded by people making 6 figures but slightly higher, you're never going to think you're rich. But if you were to look at the bottom and then up, then you would consider, oh, I'm rich. So he uses like someone that's making $50,000. Of course, when they see $100,000, they're gonna think that's rich. When someone's making $100,000, they're gonna think they need to be $500,000. When someone's making $500,000, they think they're gonna need to be a billionaire. So just hitting on that, a billion or millionaire. But hitting on that is showing that we need to make a definition of what rich is and try to look at. We're not looking at that inequality. We're thinking everything's fine, but we're not looking at that inequality, and that's our issue. So next thing we had to listen to kind of like a radio show, and this was an absolute favorite. I really love this because it taps into education and how money can play a key in it. And I never stopped to think about it, or I have, because of certain things that have been in the news lately, in a sense that people are paying off for SAT scores and ACT scores and automatic admission, things like that. It's court cases. But what I found intriguing is that people pay thousands of dollars for consultants in order to prep their college application. So the radio show Day to Day is talking about issues of education and how to get in. So they call upon a consultant, Michelle Hernandez, who is actually someone that used to work at Dartmouth. She talks about what she does, how she does it. So basically her starting age of accepting people is from 8th to 9th grade. She takes 25 kids per level, and by doing so, she usually fills up in the middle of 9th grade, which I found was really crazy, but is what it is. And then within those 4 years, you pay $40,000, which she says it's not a lot, that she's full-time, there for the holidays, everything. I personally would not have $40,000 to pay for a consultant to get into college. Paying $40,000 for college already is a lot. So if you add the college tuition and the cost of going to college, and if I were to use a consultant in order to get in, you're looking at more than $80,000 easily just to get into the college and do your first year. So I personally could not afford that. So for me, it was mind-boggling to think that people pay $40,000 in order to prep their college application. And then she also has a 10th to 11th grade application boot camp, and it's a 4-day camp that preps their college application. It's $14,000. My family, personally, $14,000 is a lot, and that's not something. Education is amazing, but $14,000 to have someone college prep you, for my family, that's a lot of money. Of course, with someone that makes high above 6 figures, that $14,000 for them may be change in their pocket, but for someone of a lower class, that's a lot of money in order to college prep. And then what does she necessarily do? She learns about them. She produces a 40 to 50 page report about their likes, their dislikes, things teachers have said about them, what they like to read, so on and so forth. And then she talks about their short-term, long-term plans, really tapping into what they like, so the college application or the people admitting them are able to see that they're doing stuff that they like. They're not just doing it for college. And then she helps them show their talent. She basically goes that she it's an investment. That's how she sells it. It's an investment. Sometimes where you go can make all the difference, and that she helps the children brainstorm and get good ideas. And then she tries to always preserve the kids' voices, but she then goes to proceed that she will shoot down 5 to 10 things that they brainstorm and to basically lead them to the right one. But they write it, so it's not anything wrong with it, because she's not writing it for them. They're writing it. She's just steering them in the right path. Then the radio show actually calls Ted O'Neill, the Dean of Admissions at the University of Chicago. And he talks that what she's doing is actually fraud, and it's basically helping them cheat, which I agree with in a sense, because yes, you can help someone out, but the way she made it sound is that every time they had an idea and she didn't think it was perfect, she'd shoot it down and basically tell them to go another route until they found the route she wanted. So she's in particularly picking what she wants them to write about and what she knows will get them in. So in a sense, it is cheating. It's like telling them, it's like having the answer key to a test, and your student wants the answers, but you're not going to give it to them, but you're going to say, well, if you were to do this, this, and this, you would probably make 100. Basically what they're doing. So, that was pretty interesting to listen to. And then he talks about how he himself is someone that helps people with papers, but he doesn't go too far. He doesn't pass that boundary. He just is like, hey, hey, you might need to rewrite this or reread this because it might not necessarily be you. But he's not going to tell them where to go with it. He talks about that she upheld her argument that she just polishes essays, but he says that she's really leading and steering them in the direction she wants them to go. And he says that it's hard to tell who deserves it unless you're on the ground and seeing what the school actually needs and things like that, such as he is. And then how the radio show asks him, well, what if a good parent wants to do this? And he goes to proceed that a good parent just needs to listen, be sympathetic, reread their their essays, and really just be bystanders and help them in this process, because in the end, who really wants to get something they did not earn? So he really taps into that. And I had to side with the Ted O'Neill, Dean of Admissions man, because I don't believe that hiring someone, a consultant, to help you get into college is necessarily the right thing. I applied to colleges that when I was younger, would have never been in my wildest dreams, but I worked so hard in order to get to where I wanted to be. And I ended up picking UTSA because it was just the perfect fit for me, because I love the area, I love the staff, I love the professors, like everything when I visited the colleges, it just was me. I did get into other colleges, but I earned the right to be there because I wrote my essays, and I had people guide me in a sense that, hey, can you read this for me and make sure that it's punctual and grammatically correct? And then they would be like, okay, hey, you might need to reread this paragraph in a sense that it doesn't sound like I know what you're trying to get across, but it's not coming across like that. And so then I would go and I would just kind of reword everything I was trying to get along, but they never said, oh, this is awful, like, no, trash it. And I got into the colleges I wanted to get into. So I really have to side with Ted O'Neill in the sense that sometimes you just need to be able to listen and be sympathetic and really just be the bystander and let the child or let the young adult figure out what they're going to do and actually earn where they're getting into, because without that sense of actual work ethic, I don't know how they would actually do in a college that they really didn't earn the right to be in, because in the end they have to do the work in the college. And what if they didn't actually have the right stuff to get in? They just had the right person to tell them what to say to get in. So that's just my little spill. As someone that's first generation, has lives in a middle class, maybe low class considering, I think I have a really great life. But of course other people have more, but my values are more than money. I appreciate what is given to me, and I appreciate my family. At the end of the day, money is not everything, and some people think it is, and that's where some of our issues lie. I think family is more important, and I didn't think that going to a super expensive college was necessarily the best plan for me, because I wanted to leave college debt-free, and also at the end of the day, this is how I balance it out. At the end of the day, I'm getting a degree, and they're getting a degree. Yes, they're getting a degree from, for example, Harvard, and I'm not necessarily Harvard, but at my college, or at UTSA, I'm getting a great education with great professors, and I could potentially get the same job that someone at Harvard does. And the radio show even says that one of the hosts is from Yale, I believe, and the other one is from a community college. It doesn't matter where you go to college. It matters how you work, what you do to get there, and how your work ethic is. I really had a problem with the consultant aspect, and I really love that Ted O'Neill, an actual dean of admission, tapped into the problems with it. So that's just a little spill. But overall, I really love this week because it really tapped into how it's not just the top 1%, there is a 20%, and Reeves really tapped into great concepts, and then the radio show really brought to light some of the issues that are happening in America today. So I really appreciated the 3 things we had to do this week because they were all really eye-opening. Thank you.